Hi, thanks so much for joining me for this English 099 Pilot Curriculum presentation. I'll give you a second to adjust your volume because my voice is probably booming right now. Thanks. Well, this is Steve Rutledge, and again, this is the English 099 Pilot Curriculum presentation I made at the in-service for spring of 2014 here at Parkland College. The goal of this presentation is to present the three main elements of the pilot curriculum that I and several other instructors here at Parkland College have used over the past few semesters. The first element of the pilot curriculum is the 14-2 structure. The second is journals, the use of journals as invention strategies. And the third is PIES paragraphs or PIES paragraph instruction. Okay, first let's take a look at a little bit of assessment I have done in my own instruction since I've started using the pilot curriculum. I first began using the pilot curriculum in the fall of 2012, and this graph represents the improvement rate that I saw in the first semester I used the pilot curriculum. The blue represents the success rate of students in my three sections I taught previous to using the pilot curriculum, and the red represents the first two semesters I actually used the pilot curriculum. So, it's not very flattering. In the fall of 11, I had a whopping 4 students make it through my one section of English 099. In spring of 2012, I had a whopping 2 students make it through my English 099, but in my defense, I will say in the same semester, spring of 2012, same curriculum, I had 9 students make it through, and that's at about 45%, which is right about the average for our program. But as I mentioned, the red represents the first 2 semesters I began using the pilot curriculum. In fall of 2012, I taught 2 sections of English 099. In one section, I had 10 students make it to 101, that's 50%, and I had 11 students in the other section, that's 55%. One interesting side note, if you adjust for attendance, using the pilot curriculum, I had 95% of students who had fewer than 9 absences make it through to English 101. In other words, if you had fewer than 3 weeks of absences, almost certainly you made it through using the pilot curriculum. As I've mentioned, several other instructors have used the pilot curriculum and they've adjusted it in various ways, but basically they've used the same elements as I have, and I asked them to give some comments a few semesters ago. One instructor commented, "I have several success stories this semester. The biggest success is this curriculum revision and the incentive to get done with class by Thanksgiving." And you'll see that in a minute when we explain the 14-2 structure. It allows some students to finish early, and some students who are very busy find that a great incentive. The second instructor expressed how much her students enjoyed using the structure with background journals and how those journals and the structure help build towards major papers. And I think you'll see that in a moment. Through using journal invention strategies and the same pattern for all 3 papers of the curriculum, students are able to see how the structure builds on itself. They don't have to reinvent the wheel because they're switching between modes or different invention strategies. And I know that we're hoping they get there eventually in their writing, but what we're trying to do with this pilot curriculum is help them succeed, to learn a pattern that will help them succeed in the most common type of writing they're going to have to do here in college. This next instructor notes, "I also like how as a class we can all get absorbed into the material we're talking about." One neat thing about teaching using the pilot curriculum is you'll be working with other instructors. And what we've done in the past is some of us have used some of the same topics, but I think you'll find the pilot curriculum works for a variety of topics and even a variety of modes. I know Pat Johnson, who uses this curriculum, still uses a straight narrative essay as her first essay and uses this structure. I know Amy Penny has used different topics. I have, Tracy Dotson, Nia Klein, other instructors have used different topics but have used this same structure. But one neat thing is when we do some of the same material, we help each other develop it. And I think you'll see in a little bit that the material some of us have used in common does help draw these students in. Finally, I doubt this is representative of the kind of success one can see using the pilot curriculum, but this instructor writes, "I've never taught an English 099 class before, but it seems unusual to me that I still have 19 out of 20 students at this point in the semester," to which I say, maybe you should be teaching this video instead of me. Of course, I also wanted to ask students what they thought of the pilot curriculum, and this is just a taste of some of the questionnaires I gave at the end of my second semester using this curriculum. First, I asked students, did the ability to finish early, remember at the end of week 14 or so, motivate you to do quality work? And we have a heavy weight here on the yes end. 8 said yes to a great extent, 6 said yes, 5 said perhaps a little, and these two I've asterisked because if memory serves me correctly, both of those students knew they wouldn't finish early, hence they weren't motivated by the time this questionnaire came about. But both of those students, if memory serves me correctly, also responded in a different question that they were motivated by the last 2 weeks where you can do a rewrite. They were motivated to stick around because they knew they could improve. Secondly, I asked students, did you find writing journals, which includes Pi's paragraphs, helped you write better papers? And again, 11 said yes to a great extent, and 3 said yes, and 5 said perhaps a little. So we're having almost 70% tell us, yes, using the journals as an invention strategy, and using that structure and the Pi's paragraphs, all which build to the actual paper, that they actually did find that was very useful. Okay, let's talk about the first element of the pilot curriculum, and that is the 14-2 structure. Here's what it is. We use 3 similarly patterned writing projects, 3 to 5 page papers, all thesis-driven, evidence-supported, fairly rigorous work. We do a systematic grammar review, and we try to finish it all by the end of 14 weeks. I will note, however, that I know some instructors like to do more papers, but smaller papers within the course of a semester, and you could use this same structure and simply have more projects for your students to do, as long as you finish within the first 14 weeks. At the end of 14 weeks, students with a B or higher by week 14 may consider themselves finished. Other students may rewrite one project the last 2 weeks. I will note that students who have the B or higher are welcome to stay in class. They have, after all, paid for 16 weeks of instruction. And I've even had a few students who did have a B and could consider themselves done, who promised me, yes, I'm going to come back that last 2 weeks and rewrite to get the A. But let me see, I had exactly 0 of them actually come back. As you know, our developmental students are very busy, time's at a premium, and they find this ability to finish very motivating, and other instructors have told me, yes, I've seen that same motivation happen in my sections when I've used the pilot curriculum. Also, let me tell you what we're shooting for. If you used my particular scoring method, during the course of the semester, students would earn about 480 points. About 100, well, exactly 100 points for the 3 major papers. Let's say we had a student score a 62 out of 100 on one of their papers, one of their major projects. Well, as you know, our developmental students, sometimes even good students, hit some sort of pothole with life or in their experience. Maybe they lost their housing, maybe they had a job shift change, maybe their parole was revoked and they missed 2 weeks and the paper they turned in just wasn't very good. The one thing I like about this pilot curriculum is it creates flexibility for that student. That student who bombed this particular paper with the 62 can have a chance to make it up again at the end. But how much they can make up, well, that needs to be kept realistic, because we don't want students who are not prepared making it to 101. We want to provide flexibility so that students who are close can legitimately make it through, but we don't want to provide magic pixie dust that somehow makes a semester of not doing any work disappear. So let's say the last 2 weeks of the 14-2 structure, our student who had a 62 rewrote the paper and rewrote it probably several times and got a 95. I will add here, when I have students do the rewrite the last 2 weeks, I make them rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until the paper is an A. Oftentimes it takes students 3 or 4 iterations. As you know, the first rewrite they do will just be to change the little grammar and punctuation marks that you made on the paper. And I send it back and say, no, you need to change what's fundamentally wrong with this paper, because for me to agree to give you a rewrite grade on this, you have to show me that you now understand what a truly good paper should look like. Then I feel comfortable in legitimately letting you move on. So let's say this student rewrote their paper 3 or 4 times and they finally caught on to what it takes to write that A paper. They've earned an extra 32 points, with, not being a math major, would equal about an extra 4% of their grade. Let's say also I let them redo a couple journals they missed. Again, our developmental students oftentimes hit these potholes in life, and let's say I let them do a couple of their journals. And let's say they earn back a total of 7% of their grade. That means if they're one of these students who's close, say if they have a 73%, well, that extra 7% would get them legitimately through to the next level after having experienced what it takes to write a high-level paper. What it doesn't do is create magic pixie dust for the student who had a 42%, and somehow, bring, magically, they now have a 79.49999, which we bump up to 80. No, we don't want to do that. But we do want to present students with the opportunity who are close. We want to give them a chance to really make it. Finally, what about the student who has the 56%? Well, you've probably had students who scored very low and just need to score high enough and want you to sort of bump it up to a D so they don't lose their financial aid. Well, the rewrite gives a chance for this student to earn that chance to keep their financial aid, as opposed to the magical bump up at the end. So to summarize, here's the pattern of the 14-2 structure as I do it with 3 papers. There are 3 units. Each unit has 3 to 4 journals, 3 or 4 extra days where some standalone types of lessons can be done, like transitions, conclusions, introductions, that sort of thing, and 2 conference days. And then we repeat the same pattern for a second paper, and then a third paper. At the end of the third paper, some may finish 2 weeks early, and some may rewrite and or, of course, take the EOS. Okay, great. Here's what the 14-2 structure looks like in an actual semester plan. This is actually my plan for spring of 2014. I'm currently teaching 4 sections of 099, which I had to make some adjustments for that. I'll show you those later. But let's go through and see how the 14-2 works in an actual semester plan. First, this is set up for a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, and probably you have something very similar in how you plan your semester. My semester starts off like every developmental instructor with a writing sample. Day 2, a syllabus review. Then day 3, I assign the first journal for the first topic, and it's due Wednesday. On Wednesday, they turn in the first journal. On Friday, I return the first journal, and they actually do a specialized corrections assignment that I have developed. You see, the goal with these journals is to give formalized instruction on the front end. And so I actually formally grade these journals. They do get marked up for grammar and punctuation. And then I actually have them do a specialized corrections on those grammar and punctuation errors, that a specialized exercise that requires them to look up the rules. And what this does is, through the journals, before they start writing the proper paper, they're already getting a sense for what are the kinds of mistakes I'm making, what are the expectations Steve has for this formalized writing, and they're getting the feedback, and they get a chance to make adjustments before they actually begin the proper paper. So they get the first journal back, they do corrections, and the second journal is assigned. I don't do many standalone grammar lessons, but you'll notice that the pilot curriculum for each unit gives you several days you can adjust and play with, depending on what you like to teach as a teacher. So for me, I do like to do some direct grammar instruction, and I always have a what is punctuation standalone lesson. So that's how I use one of those flex days within this curriculum. I get I collect Journal 2 on the Wednesday. They get Journal 2 back, and again, they do corrections because, again, I'm trying to front end a lot of this instruction so that they understand expectations, they understand what a really solid paragraph looks like, and they understand kind of what their own quirks are in their writing. Finally, I assign Journal 3, and they do Journal 3. Then we spend a day doing invention strategies, planning strategies for the paper, and we actually start writing the paper. I do a standalone lesson on counter arguments. I might not necessarily do this every unit, but for this particular unit, the counter argument worked really well this semester. So I do spend another flex day going over counter argument paragraphs. I also spend one of my flex days for the unit doing introductions and conclusions, and of course this is going to make the first paper take a little longer, but I'm sure like you that you just have to front end some of these things with the first unit so that they understand. And then in the curriculum, the pilot curriculum, we lean heavily on conference time. In my case, I have to actually cancel 2 classes to fit all the 20-minute conferences in. That's what I do, is 20 minutes. And I know just about everyone else listening to this probably you already do conferences, but that's built in to the pilot curriculum. And finally, there's one final flex day I put right after the conferences because I like to see if there's any particular issue that's come up in from their conferences that I can see. This particular semester, I saw that, oh boy, they're having trouble with transitions. So I actually did a standalone lesson in transitions before they actually turned in the first paper. So let's take a look. February 19th, this semester, they turned in their first paper, and it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to get that first paper done. But again, we were front-ending a lot of instruction. They were getting a lot of highly contextualized grammar and punctuation instruction ahead of time, and some important standalone lessons along the ways. In a sense, with the pilot curriculum, all we do is sort of hit repeat. Students then start writing Journal 1 on the next topic. I like to return papers and have them actually do corrections and do a little bit of metacognitive work about where they think about the choices they made in writing and how it turned out for them. They get Journal 1 back. Journal 2 is assigned. A bit about modes, teaching in the modes. As I mentioned, Pat Johnson uses the pilot curriculum, and she has shaped it to work for a narrative assignment. Her journals obviously are different than the journals for the kind of papers I assign. But I do some modal work because maybe like you find that you like to have students do, it's very appropriate to insert a personal experience story even in a thesis-driven evidence-supported paper. So the pilot curriculum creates these flex days where you can hit some of this modal work, and I have a little lesson here on narratives because I think those are great for intros or conclusions. Sometimes in the explanation analysis portion of paragraphs, it's great to have a personal story. So I wanted to do a standalone lesson. And again, there's lots of flexible days within these units where you can pick up on the things you think are particularly important. Well, Journal 3 is due, and then we go through the same thing. We plan the paper out with the planning sheet. We start writing, and then we hit 2 days of conferences, a flex day where I can go over any issues I've seen in their writing, and then this particular semester, well actually I always try to do this, the second unit finishes right before they go for spring break. Okay, so hopefully we had a nice spring break. And we're ready to begin our third paper. I like to do a personal interest paper where students can really take any question they're interested in, and I always get a variety Some very serious. I have a couple students doing domestic violence, and why do partners stay with partners who abuse them, that sort of thing. All the way to things like, is cross tillage the best kind of tilling? What's the best kind of fertilizer for my garden? And all kinds of things that students can do some light yet credible research on. But we're following the same pattern. They do the same sort of journals. The only difference is they're providing the source material for the journals. And they're doing the same thing, creating, organizing their information through journals, doing a planning sheet, throw in a couple flexible writing days, maybe do a standalone lesson here and there on doing taglines, works cited sheets, that sort of thing. We're going to hit a couple of conferences, and then on April 21st, the magic starts. This is where the 14-2 break comes. They turn their final paper in. I'm actually going to have them do an online assignment. This will do some metacognitive work about what they've done this semester, what they've learned, that sort of thing. Also biding me some time because I've got to turn around 4 sections worth of papers, because on April 25th, everyone gets their paper back. Every grade is up to date. And those who have the required B, as long as they've completed their computer-based grammar learning, which I also add in my class called Learning Curve, as long as they've completed that and they have the B, they may consider themselves done. But the students who don't have that B have the opportunity to rewrite their paper. Or I should say, one project of their choosing. And we start that rewriting process right away. And then we have a few open labs where students can come and can work on their papers. What I find, again, is that students usually give me their first rewrite after 20 minutes of correcting a couple grammar errors, and I have to turn it back and say, no, let's work on what the fundamental issue is here. Of course, students can also meet with you outside of class during this time. We do the EOS. I do not require my students who have graded out already to take the EOS, and that's fine as per our department policy, by the way. But students also continue to do rewrites. Interestingly, I have had students put more weight on doing their rewrite than doing the EOS, and that's thought for pause or pause for thought, whichever that is. Anyway, officially, all the rewrites should be done by May 9th. But I don't advertise this to the students, but I am fine if a student is making progress, they've tried a couple iterations of the paper, they're genuinely doing the work, I am fine letting that bleed over into finals week, again, as long as they've shown progress along the way. One quick success story, again, students usually when they have to rewrite, turn the first one in quickly, and they're astonished to find that I give it right back to them. And it takes 2, 3, 4 iterations. I had one student who confided in me after writing his 4th rewrite that he had never had to write English papers before in high school. Never. And what he told me was, I finally learned that you can't just blather on and on and on, but that you have to have a point. And that's really what we're trying to do, is take a student like that, give him the opportunity to rewrite. He actually had a 73%. He was not going to make it, but because he was able to rewrite, he finally caught on to fundamentally what was wrong with his writing, and now he legitimately is able to move on. So that's the first part of the pilot curriculum, and that's the 14, again, what we call the 14-2 structure. But there are 2 other elements that I'd like you to consider using as well. As you know, part of what we do with the pilot curriculum is journal invention, formalized feedback, front-ending a lot of skill building before the actual paper writing happens, and we like to embed in those journals Pi's paragraph instruction. I will say exactly how exactly the type of journals people create varies from instructor to instructor. Again, you have someone like Pat Johnson doing a narrative her first time, and that's a lot different from these journals you're going to see in a second. But she's giving formalized feedback that builds to the paper, and that's really the spirit behind the pilot curriculum. Also, Amy Penny, who also uses the pilot curriculum, has shaped it totally for her own needs, and she finds that the journals that I offer, they're a little bit busy, so she does her own pared down versions. What I'm trying to say is that People are very flexible according to the mode that they're doing, or the particular topic they're doing, or just the particular way they like to teach. Okay, here is the handout students get from me when they first learn how to write journals. I give them a metaphor of a pizza place that will go unnamed for copyright purposes. It's something like this. Better ingredients, better... yeah, okay. And the idea is that if they'll do the journals, they'll gather the ingredients that they'll need to actually make the paper a little later. So again, I try to sell it as the journal is simply a way to help you organize and think about your information as you study your topic. I actually met one student who went through the pilot curriculum, my second semester using it, and she told me she uses the journals on her own in other classes because she found them a good way to organize her information. And that's really what we're trying to create with this curriculum, is a sense of pattern that students can use that will predict a certain level of success, hopefully. Okay, the journals I have them write have 4 sections. The first section, I simply ask them to quickly summarize and mention each of the videos or articles I ask them to look at. I just want to know that they've at least opened up the article, at least glanced through it, at least watched a little bit of it, enough to, in a sentence or two, describe it. That's section 1. Just briefly describe each video and article I've asked you to look at. Section 2 is really where the main formalized feedback happens in my journals. I ask them to write what I and some others call PIES paragraphs. The first element of a PIES paragraph is simply a topic sentence. Have a clear point. So when students read and watch the material for that night's journal, they need to make some point from something that they saw. After making the point, next they need to insert some sort of detail or quote from something, from one of the journals, one of the videos or articles that they read. After inserting the detail, next they need to do some analysis or explanation. And this explanation, as you know, can take a variety of forms. Maybe the best way for them to analyze and explain is to provide a simile, or perhaps to connect to some sort of illustrative personal experience, or maybe to make a text-to-text connection with something else they've heard or seen or read. Wouldn't it be lovely if they made a connection to CCS class? I'm always telling my students that, by the way. And there's any number of things they can do with the explanation. Perhaps they could pick out a key word from the quote or expound on something about the detail. And finally, the S in PIES stands for summarize. And the summary sentence should repeat in some form the main point of the paragraph. I used to only do PIE and not the S. I actually got this from Deanna Williams, who uses PIES, but I think now she uses PEES, P-E-E-S, if I remember correctly. But at any rate, I saw she used the S, and I think it's a good idea. That last summary sentence kind of helps the student make certain the paragraph didn't drift off the point. Finally, section 3 for the journals is they choose 4 quotes or details from the readings. And again, the idea is they're building sort of this collection of quotes or details that they'll be able to use when it comes time to write the formalized paper. And of course, they need to tell us where the quote comes from and who said it or wrote it, etc., or where the detail comes from. They also learn what exactly a quote is. Don't be surprised if you have to teach them that it means the exact words from someone or from something. Section 4 is simply write a good question. From the videos and articles you watched, what's a good question you'd like to ask? And I will always, when I grade these journals, sort of have a dialogue with the students about these questions. But I find Section 4 very useful if I have students get together in discussion groups. I can say, okay, everybody, why don't you go around, each person share the question you asked, and each person answer it. Or pick a quote. What's one good quote that you chose, and why did you choose that quote? These journals also already give students material, so when it comes to discussion time, they have something to discuss. Okay, let me talk really specifically about what students see for the version of the pilot curriculum I use. Again, Each unit, each paper, is organized around usually some issue or social event or something of that nature. I did this first one this semester on the tasing of Jack Johnson. I've changed his name for copyright purposes and taken a couple things out of here since I'm posting this permanently. But at any rate, Jack Johnson was tased at a Philadelphia Phillies baseball game in May of 2010. So the first journal they get is they go on Cobra, this will pop up, and the journal gives some background information. Usually my first journal is just trying to give background information. It will usually include links to articles, in this case an article, and videos that relate to the particular topic. And then after they've read the article, in this case watched the 2 videos, they're ready to write their first standard journal response, 4-part standard journal response, where they summarize, they write a PIES paragraph, they pull some quotes or details, they ask a question. And what they produce should look something like this. Hey, before we jump into that, how about a little context? This is an actual video from a fan of Jack Johnson, quote unquote, being tased. I can use it because it's not copyrighted. I won't show you the actual tasing, but you get the idea. And this was an interesting controversy back in 11 because he was the first fan to be tased for jumping on the field, and it raises all sorts of questions about whether this particular tasing was legitimate. Well, you can imagine after watching this video, reading an article about it, students are then ready to hopefully make some kind of point, hopefully take details or quotes that they think might be important for their future paper about this particular event. All right, now back to what I hope students produce. What I'm hoping students produce will be a journal that looks something like this. And I don't know about you, but I always supply my students example assignments. This, by the way, is my general pen name, right up there, flashing in your left corner. And some people get the joke, some people don't. That's all right. Any rate, here's a journal. I always have them create a title that connects to the main point they want to draw on from this journal. And here we go. Section 1, again, they read the articles, they watch the videos, and then they just tell me really quickly what they watched and saw, so I know they've at least looked at it. Section 2, they're creating this PIES paragraph, and I put this in colors just to illustrate kind of what PIES means again. This red is the topic sentence. That's the P in PIES, the point. Here, we'll write this in like this. And we'll put that in red. The point here reads, Johnson looks like a harmless prankster who delights the crowd with his hilarious 2-minute run. Next, they've got to insert, that's the I in PIE. They've got to insert some kind of supportive detail from the readings or from the videos. For example, Jack is just running around with a towel, pumping his fist. There's a detail. In a YouTube video of the tasing posted by a fan who was there, you can clearly see the first baseman laughing into his glove, and someone nearby in the stands yells on the video, "Look, he's laughing! He's laughing into his glove!" So there's a nice little insert. So far we've done P and I. Now they got to explain. In this case, I added a personal example. Like me, the crowd and players seem to look at Johnson like a harmless prankster. Johnson reminds me of my friend Bill Erickson, who walked across the graduation stage juggling 3 balls in the air. Was it out of place? Yeah, but the crowd loved it, just like the Phillies fans loved Johnson. So my analysis is kind of built on here a text-to-self comparison, and that's just an example of one thing the students can do. I also actually add a simile here. Johnson seems like the people in those little costumes stadiums have raced during the 7th inning stretch. See picture. I am fine with students using pictures personally, as long as they explain them in the text of the paragraph and it's not merely decoration. Also, of course, if it were a more formalized research paper, I'd have them cite the picture as well. Finally, this one is in red again, the summary sentence. And of course it's in red because hopefully the students catch on to this, the summary should match the topic sentence. At least an idea, right? And so that helps them make sure that the paragraph didn't drift in point. So I understand that security guards may have a right to view him as a threat, but to the rest of us, Johnson was the highlight of the game. He's basically the weenie boy with no costume, hence, by the way, my title, which sometimes I like to sort of throw that title in the final sentence of an essay. That's kind of cool sometimes. Okay, then I got my section 3 where I pulled some quotes. I made sure I told where it came from and who said it or wrote it, 4 quotes or details. And that's really where we're at. The pilot curriculum is a 14-2 structure. It uses 3 thesis-driven, evidence-supported papers. Of course, you can do more papers if you think that's how you like to teach. Absolutely. There's a lot of flexibility in the structure with these extra days. But the main idea is by week 14, in a 16-week course, some students can finish early and other students can stick around for the last 2 and rewrite. We use journals for formalized feedback. A small note why that's important. Our course information form that we're legally required to abide by, it does allow for 3 essays, but it still requires 16 graded pages. Because I give formalized feedback, including grammar, punctuation, etc., on the PIES paragraphs and the journals, those become formally submitted pages. And so even though they're 3 essays, we do way more than 16 graded pages, as you can see. Finally, the PIES paragraphs. Hey, that just provides consistency, continuity over the course of the semester. It takes them a while, believe it or not, to catch on to that pattern, most of these students. I will add also that one CCS instructor has adopted PIES paragraphs, and I think that's great, so that we're speaking the same language. I think it'd be really neat if we all spoke the same language. I talked to 3 other instructors, and they do PIES paragraphs in 101 and 102. So again, it's neat to have some continuity for our students as they move on. Some people do PEAT paragraphs. Same idea. The A stands for analysis. I actually like that better, but I don't want to redo all of my stuff. So maybe eventually we'll do PEAT instead of PIES. And even Deanna Williams, from whom I took PIES originally, is now doing P's, at least last I heard. But it's the same idea. And as you can see, so it has some currency. To teach PIES paragraphs will have some currency, have some transfer to other classes. Hey, my hope in your watching this is that you will consider doing the pilot curriculum for the fall of 2014, spring of 2015. Maybe just try it in one of your sections if you have multiple 099 sections. And let's run some numbers. Let's compare. Let's see if we're moving the needle. It has worked for me. Others say it's working for them. It is not, doesn't solve all the problems. I have all the usual problems of difficulties and challenges, but it has allowed for an extra few students to legitimately make it through to the next level. So if you have any questions, please contact me, Steve Rutledge, and I'll be glad to tell you more about it. There are lots of other instructors who do this who can talk to you about it as well.